On this Saturday night, Russia ratchets up its assault on Ukraine. What Moscow's hypersonic missiles are capable of, and what Putin may be hoping to accomplish.
I don't think it'll work.
Fresh bombardments decimating buildings in Ukraine as people wait for their worst fears to become a reality and the supply chain is choked off. Up in flames, the deadly inferno that destroyed an entire Texas town. And who helped develop hockey?
It needs to be brought to the Canadian public's attention.
The game plan to give credit where credit is due.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Russian forces are pushing further into the besieged and battered city of Mariupol tonight, where fierce fighting has erupted in the city's center. This was once a school, a place of peace and learning. Not anymore. Waves of Russian airstrikes have bombarded the city for weeks. Civilians say they can't even bury the dead as fighting rages on. There are fears Mariupol will fall in the days ahead. If it does, it'll be the first major Ukrainian city to be seized, providing a strategic advantage to Russian forces. Russia is slowly advancing on multiple fronts, and now, for the first time since the invasion, Russian-fired hypersonic missiles have killed dozens of soldiers and destroyed a military ammunitions warehouse in Mykolaiv, a port city near the Black Sea. Our Mercedes Stephenson is in Lviv with the latest. And Mercedes, is this a sign Russia has escalated the war?
Colleen, hypersonic missiles are a weapon that could change the face of modern warfare. And we now know that Russia is actively using these weapons in Ukraine in combat for the first time, a claim initially made by the Russians and verified by American officials to a U.S. news network. In a briefing on Saturday, the Russian Defense Ministry revealed it used the hypersonic Kinzhal missile system, claiming a strike destroyed an underground arms depot of missiles and aircraft ammunition in the town of Delatin, located about 100 kilometers from the border with Romania. The destruction of the depot could not be confirmed. Hypersonic missiles are a new kind of threat, ballistic missiles that move extraordinarily fast, at least 5 times the speed of sound. A flash of light and destruction. Their extreme speed, precision, and maneuverability, even mid-flight, means they are highly effective at striking targets and difficult to defend against with existing air defense systems. That's made them desirable weapons in a global arms race for countries like the U.S., China, and Russia, seeking to shorten the time adversaries have to react to a potential strike and increasing their accuracy. The Kinzhal missile used in Ukraine means dagger in Russian. It was first introduced by Vladimir Putin in 2018 to showcase Moscow's military superiority. As recently as last December, Putin was again bragging about Russia's hypersonic capabilities, calling them world-leading. Russia claims the missile system can travel at Mach 10. That's 10 times the speed of sound, or 12,000 kilometers an hour. These claims have not been independently verified. The Russian missile system has a range of 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers, but that can be extended because they're fired by military jets. And while there's no doubt that the use of a hypersonic missile is a showstopper, experts say it's also likely showmanship, as much a psychological weapon as a tactical one. Putin's war in Ukraine has been struggling, and experts say he likely wants to show a message to the West about his military strength and capabilities.
The danger is that Putin, the sociopath, may well try to use other weapon systems to try and club the Ukraine defenders into submission. I don't think it'll work, but you and I don't think the same way that he does.
Here in Lviv, where missiles struck yesterday, life continues. And while there's live music and crammed cafes, there's also soldiers in the streets with guns and air raid sirens, as the people of Ukraine wait to see how Vladimir Putin will continue to escalate in his weapons and his targets. Colleen?
Mercedes Stephenson in Lviv, Ukraine. Thanks, Mercedes. Russian forces are surrounding cities, crippling humanitarian supply chains and escape routes in what appears to be a new and disturbing tactic of slowly starving civilians. Tonight, our Jeff Semple is near Odesa, Ukraine, where food and water are running out.
In normal times, the Odesa food market serves an eclectic mix of seafood, pasta, and pints. But these are not normal times. Today, volunteers are collecting and dishing out medicine, blankets, and other life-saving supplies to civilians and soldiers fighting on the front line, which is only about 100 kilometers from here.
We have a little gap of time to prepare our city.
Before the war, Inga Kordinovska ran a law firm. Now she runs a humanitarian volunteer center. With most businesses closed, they're providing food for thousands. But 3 weeks into the war, supplies are already running out.
We don't have Russian occupation in the city, but it's really difficult to find some very necessary things, especially medicines.
Russia's push into parts of Ukraine appears to have stalled, but its military is choking Ukraine's supply chains, according to the country's president. Appearing in another defiant video, Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia is trying to starve civilians into submission. The stark choice now facing ordinary Ukrainians: stay and risk dying from fighting or starvation, or leave. But for some, that cost is also unbearable. This has fast become a heart-wrenching routine. Since the invasion, regular rail service is suspended, but every day these free trains arrive to take women and children who want to leave out of the country. Anna and her 8-year-old daughter came to catch a train to Poland, even though it means leaving her husband and her mother behind. We couldn't wait any longer. We have to go while there's still an opportunity. But we're leaving with a heavy heart, she said. Ukrainian men are required to stay behind and fight. This crowd is full of families who may be seeing each other for the last time. As the train arrives, there's a scramble to get on board to secure a spot, leaving no time for a proper goodbye. Many, like Anna's husband, linger outside the window as long as they can, savoring every last moment before the train, carrying their wives and children, pulls away. But many residents of Odesa remain, trying to carry on even as Russian forces inch closer. We are doing our best, trying to live a normal life, he says. On a sunny Saturday, the city's main market was packed. Odesa's largest jazz club is closed because of the war, so the musicians performed from the balcony.
People need some bright light during all this stuff.
Russia has more soldiers, a much bigger military, but Ukraine's spirit feels insurmountable. Jeff Semple, Global News, Odesa.
More than 3 million people have fled the war in Ukraine, and that number is growing. Mike Armstrong has more on why leaving or staying are both risky options.
These are images released by an aide to the Ukrainian president. They are refugees being picked up from 2 cities in the central part of the country and taken to safer areas. Of the 10 humanitarian corridors open on this day, 2 led to the city of Brovary, just east of Kyiv. The stories from that city's hospital help explain the challenge and the danger of trying to get around. This man was shot 3 times. He says he's a civilian and was traveling in a civilian vehicle. Russian soldiers, he says, shot through his windshield. If moving is dangerous, so is staying put. In a place like Mariupol right now, it means more misery every day. This woman just escaped. This woman says she spent 10 days in a cellar hiding from bombs and didn't leave once. They had no electricity and no running water. In the town of Zaporizhzhia, a grocery store is turned into a refugee center. Many of the people in it left Mariupol and consider themselves lucky. This man says anyone who could leave did, but many didn't make it. They drove by bombed and burned out cars on their way out of town. There were bodies, he says, in the streets. Now, this is where so many want to go, west to Poland. Of the more than 3.2 million refugees who fled Ukraine, about 2/3 have crossed into Poland. This mother of 5 says by the time she decided to leave her home west of Kyiv with her children, there was no food and no way to stay. On this day, among those crossing over was a woman whose destination is Canada. She'd been on vacation and was home in Ukraine visiting her parents from studying sociology in Canada when the war broke out. She didn't regret being there.
Actually, I'm kind of really glad that I could go here, even though it's real terrible right now, but at least I could see my parents, because I don't know what's going to be.
She says right now her future is hard to worry about. She's safe in Poland. Her thoughts are all about her parents, who stayed behind. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Rzeszów, Poland.
As thousands continue to escape Ukraine, many will make their way to Canada. But just how ready is Ottawa to handle the influx of newcomers? And how long will they receive federal assistance? Our chief political correspondent, David Akin, sat down with Canada's immigration minister to get some answers. David.
Since January the 1st, Canada has taken in more than 9,200 Ukrainians, including more than 3,300 since the Russian invasion began on February the 24th. But with the total number of Ukrainians fleeing their war-ravaged country totaling well over 3 million already, Canada is expecting that many more will seek refuge behind our borders. How many more? Immigration Minister Sean Fraser says that's impossible to say.
It's hard to predict the precise number that we should plan for, and that's why we built a program that was designed to respond to demand rather than a predetermined allocation as we do with ordinary refugee resettlement programs, which are typically spread over many years.
Canada took in, for example, more than 73,000 Syrian refugees. It has set a goal of resettling 40,000 Afghanistan refugees, of which 9,000 are already here. But while refugees from Syria and Afghanistan who build new lives in Canada do not expect to return to their country of origin, the hope and the expectation is that Ukrainians coming to Canada will return once war ends.
With respect to the crisis in Ukraine, we needed to build a system that had that flexibility to respond to the short-term demand, but the supports that are needed may vary greatly.
And there is one other key difference. Most of the refugees are women and children. Ukrainian law has made it illegal for fighting-age men to leave that country. And that means the supports Canada will provide those women and children who hope to be here only for a year, maybe two, will have to be different than the support systems of our other refugee resettlement programs, which are typically aimed at families who plan to permanently stay in Canada. Colleen.
Thanks, David. And David's hosting the West Block this week. You can watch his full interview with the immigration minister tomorrow, right here on Global. Together, Russia and Ukraine are responsible for more than a quarter of the world's wheat exports. Now, as the war stretches into its fourth week, implications for the global food supply are becoming all too clear, with some warning the consequences could be catastrophic. Dan Spector has that part of the story.
This tranquil farm in France's countryside is thousands of kilometers from the destruction in Ukraine. But Isabelle Le Balleur says collateral damage from the conflict is being felt here on her green pastures. Today there is a direct impact on our farm, she says. Her animals eat grain, and Le Balleur says the price per ton has more than doubled since the war began. Not to mention the sharp rise in the cost of fuel and her inability to sell her animals for more, an equation she describes as unbearable. COVID-19, labor shortages and inflation have already contributed to a rise in food prices. And now a region often called Europe's breadbasket is in chaos. Together, Russia and Ukraine account for nearly 30% of the globe's wheat, and that's not all.
The 3 Fs all are impacted very highly: food, fertilizer, fuel.
The longer the conflict rages on, the higher the chance of food shortages.
It will have a very, very big impact on a lot of Asian and African countries directly, but throughout the world indirectly in some way.
Crippling sanctions on Russia have reduced supply. And on Saturday, Poland's prime minister proposed Europe block all trade with Moscow. Fully cutting off Russia's trade would further force Russia to consider whether it would be better to stop this cruel war, he said.
If there is something like that full trade blockade, it will have a very severe impact.
Could Canada increase its wheat production to help fill the void? Right now, that question is difficult to answer.
Last year we had a pretty bad drought.
The most recent crop was short by about 7 million tons. Farmers are hoping for better weather, but there's also a seed shortage, rising costs, and a need to rotate crops.
Even if we produce even the normal amount of wheat, that might still not be enough to meet the global demand.
Adding yet another twist, there's a looming work stoppage at CP Rail. Trains are vital for wheat producers to get their products to market. 3,000 workers could be locked out early Sunday if an agreement is not met. Dias says Canada's reputation is at risk. Dan Spector, Global News, Ottawa.
A 24-year-old man has been arrested for allegedly attacking worshippers with bear spray inside a mosque near Toronto. Police say he was also waving a hatchet. Several men held him until officers arrived. Investigators are considering all possible motivations, including hate. Coming up, the out-of-control wildfire in Texas that's already claimed a life and burned a town to the ground. Raging wildfires in Texas have now turned deadly. A sheriff's deputy was killed trying to save others. Officials are sifting through the destruction as crews tried to gain the upper hand during a break in the weather. Jennifer Johnson reports.
It's a race against time for Texas firefighters as gusty winds are predicted to return Sunday. The wind-fueled wildfires have already scorched hundreds of kilometers, destroying almost the entire town of Ranger.
I've been fire chief here 40 years, and when you have something like this, it hurts. It hurts the whole community.
The largest wildfire is burning in Eastland County, surrounded by thick brush and grassy areas. Hundreds of homes there have been evacuated. One sheriff's deputy, Sergeant Barbara Fenley, was going door to door telling people to get out, but lost her life after returning to check on an elderly resident.
She was out serving, trying to evacuate people, and just tragedy struck. But she's going to be missed so much.
Fenley leaves behind a husband and 3 children. The governor of Texas paid his respects to the first responder, later declaring 11 counties a disaster.
Already we know that there have been at least 50 homes that have been lost. Probably as we are able to better surveil damages here in the coming days, we will find more than that.
The smoke is so heavy, air quality warnings have been issued in Houston, 5 hours away. Several months of dry, windy weather have fueled deadly fires in Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and now Texas.
We are not out of danger yet for our high hazard fire risk. So we just ask that the community take sincere caution in your outdoor activities.
Low visibility from heavy smoke is hampering firefighters on the ground and in the air. But there is one sign of hope. Showers are in the forecast next week. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Just ahead, the cosmic photo op causing a stir around the world and beyond.
All right, go for it. All right, go ahead. Go first.
Russian cosmonauts have arrived at the International Space Station, but it's what they're wearing that's getting the most attention. The 3 men boarded dressed in yellow spacesuits with blue accents, the colors of Ukraine. The standard Russian uniform is plain blue, and at least one of the astronauts was seen wearing it before takeoff. When asked about the decision to wear the new suits, one of the cosmonauts said they had a lot of yellow material to use up. 4 U.S. soldiers have been killed in Norway. Their aircraft crashed during a NATO military exercise there. Troops prepared for what's known as the Cold Response exercise for 2 weeks before the deadly incident. A rescue helicopter and a Norwegian military plane found the wreckage, but poor weather conditions have made it impossible for rescue aircraft to land. 30,000 troops from NATO and partner countries are taking part in the exercises, which continue until April 1st. For the first time since January of last year, the Chinese government is reporting deaths from COVID-19. In the past day, 2 people have died from the illness. Both were elderly with underlying health conditions. One was not vaccinated. The country's official COVID death toll is over 4,600. China is now facing its worst COVID outbreak since the virus emerged in late 2019. Next, a hockey historian's goal to see the game's Indigenous origins score a place in the Hall of Fame. It may be Canada's game, but a form of hockey was being played here long before Canada existed. Now, as Ross Lord reports, one researcher wants to see a First Nation recognized in the Hockey Hall of Fame for its part in developing the game.
As a hockey fan and researcher, Mark Grant has come to a stark conclusion. Indigenous communities that helped develop Canada's national pastime have been unjustly ignored.
The contribution that they have made as craftsmen alone is nothing short of epic, and it needs to be brought to the Canadian public's attention.
Contributions made more clear to Grant after he watched this documentary called The Game of Hockey, a Mi'kmaq Story. Compiling both written and oral histories, the documentary highlights popular hockey sticks made by Mi'kmaq craftsmen from tree branches in the 1800s that helped popularize the game, and wooden pucks that predate the National Hockey League but were the same size as those that were mass-produced later.
He said it was an inch thick and 3 inches wide. And today, the NHL official puck is 3 inches wide and 1 inch thick.
As I watched the video, I realized how many of my pre-existing assumptions about ice hockey history were in serious need of reconsideration as I contemplated what they were telling me.
Grant was so taken, he sent a submission to the Hockey Hall of Fame for the Mi'kmaq to be recognized in the Builder category.
I would love to see the Hockey Hall of Fame induct the Mi'kmaq First Nation, or create a special place for them within the hall as a permanent exhibit.
For the documentary's co-director, Mi'kmaq activist Cheryl Maloney, wider recognition makes perfect sense.
I think the roots of the game are Mi'kmaq roots. And how funny is that with the roots of trees? I think this would be a really important move for Canada and the game of hockey to bring back those stories and recognize that this history was lost to Canadians, not just the Mi'kmaq people, but Canadians.
The Hall of Fame currently includes a diversity exhibit, but there's no specific mention of the Mi'kmaq contribution to developing the game. Submissions that are supported and eventually approved by the Hall's selection committee are announced in June. Ross Lord, Global News, Windsor, Nova Scotia.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada is this patriotic and illuminated astronaut sculpted out of snow in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Some light on this last night of winter. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Have a good night.